Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Bonsoir et bienvenue à une soirée de découverte. De découverte avec un des pères de l'Internet, Vint Cerf, qu'on parlera avec lui, et aussi avec les personnes derrière cette technologie qui conduit cette troisième révolution industrielle dans le monde et qui sont ici, dans la région de l'Hainaut, dans la province de l'Hainaut. Et on va parler de l'avenir de cet Internet dans le monde et ici aussi, au stockage de données, the Data Storage Center à Saint-Ghislain. On commence à noter avec ce sera un événement en direct. On peut tweeter avec Vint Cerf Belgium, hashtag, avec Google+, mondialement.be. Et c'est un événement sur Facebook, Vint Cerf YouTube Party, donc c'est sur YouTube, à travers Facebook. Et aussi, on a une équipe de réseau social networking, qui vont voir sur Internet les gens qui regardent cet événement et nous donner des questions et des commentaires de l'Internet. On commence avec Jean-Paul de Plus, président de mondialement, vous connaissez peut-être. Jean-Paul?
Yes. Bonjour Chris.
Bonjour.
Salut.
Bonjour. 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 Alors Jean-Paul, vous êtes le président de mondialement, oui, qui travaille avec Google à préserver la culture sur l'Internet.
Oui, d'abord, il faut peut-être en quelques mots expliquer pourquoi j'introduis cette séance. Le gouverneur de la province, Tommy Leclerc, devait nous rejoindre. Finalement, il vient d'avoir un problème et donc je remercie son cabinet d'être présent. Ceci expliquera pourquoi c'est moi qui prends la parole d'emblée.
Une autre fois, a rain check, comme on dit en anglais. D'accord.
Okay. Mais oui, évidemment, Google et le mondialement, c'est une histoire qui a maintenant plus de 2 ans et effectivement, une rencontre s'est faite sur l'histoire, ce qui est assez extraordinaire finalement. C'est le passé qui a permis de mettre en lumière Google, en tout cas en partie, par rapport à cette histoire de l'Internet.
Oui. Et on ira un peu plus dans les détails là, mais ce passé ici dans la région fait partie de cette évolution économique. Bien sûr, c'est une région avec une longue tradition de charbon et acier qui s'est convertie maintenant, est en train de transition à cette nouvelle économie numérique. Google est ici comme le plus grand investisseur en Belgique avec ce Data Storage Center. Comment est-ce qu'il y a une sorte de synergie avec l'économie ici?
Oui, il y a une synergie. On tente en fait cette conversion industrielle, parce que ce n'est pas simple évidemment. On vient d'une industrie qui était une industrie lourde et puis on tente des choses beaucoup plus précises. Mais ça passe aussi par un grand projet qui est celui de 2015. Chacun d'entre vous aura certainement entendu parler, pour le moins,
la capitale
culturelle européenne en 2015. Oui. La culture sera évidemment la plaque essentielle, le terreau essentiel de Mons 2015, mais nous comptons effectivement sur 2015 pour relancer en quelque sorte la dynamique culturelle et sociale. C'est un pari à ce stade.
Très bien. Et Google est là avec vous pour préserver la culture, pour préserver cet Internet sur les cartes, c'est ça?
Ah oui, c'est une longue histoire. Je veux dire, il y a plus de 100 ans, effectivement, 2 hommes, Paul Hotelet et Henri Lafontaine, ont essayé de compiler, de ramasser tout ce qu'il y avait, d'appeler tout ce qu'il y avait comme connaissances de par le monde et de tenter de les classer. Pourquoi? Pour les rendre accessibles au monde entier, pour que les gens puissent trouver un langage commun.
Et M. Lafontaine a gagné le prix Nobel de la paix en 1913, l'année avant la Première Guerre.
Voilà, il y aura 100 ans, très exactement, le 10 décembre. Nous sommes à un mois de ce bel anniversaire. Oui, donc c'est quelque chose qui peut paraître extraordinaire, effectivement, d'avoir le prix Nobel de la paix en 1913 à quelques mois de la guerre 14, surtout dans cet esprit de vouloir faire que les hommes puissent parler sur un langage commun, langage qu'il avait inventé avec Paul Hotelet.
Ce que j'ai trouvé très émouvant pour moi, parce que mon grand-père américain, mon grand-père français était dans la Première Guerre mondiale, et si M. Lafontaine avait plus de succès avec son idée, peut-être que mes grands-parents ne seraient pas battus. Voilà. Donc, Intéressant. Bon, Jean-Paul, merci beaucoup.
Merci à
On
toi.
va en parler davantage
Oui.
plus tard. Continuons avec cette découverte, avec une vidéo de Google Glass. Si vous ne connaissez pas, c'est une sorte de lunette où on peut employer l'Internet pour faire l'Internet avec des lunettes et prendre des photos et des vidéos. Donc, regardez, je trouve que cette vidéo, c'est très inspirant.
Okay, Glass, record a video.
This is it. We're on in 2 minutes.
Okay, Glass, hang out with the Flying Club.
Google photos of tiger heads. You ready? You ready?
Right there. Okay, Glass, take a picture.
Holy sh**. That is awesome.
Okay, Glass, record a video!
After this bridge, first exit.
Google, stay delicious and Thai.
Arroy.
Alroy.
Google jellyfish.
Well, let's see.
It's beautiful.
Mesdames et messieurs, je vous présente Vint Cerf, évangéliste de l'Internet de Google. Vint Cerf.
Chris, how are you?
Hello, Vint. Hello, Vint.
Bonjour.
Please.
Bonsoir.
You take that side, I think, huh? Vint Cerf va nous aider à découvrir un peu davantage le Google Glass. Il va faire une petite démonstration pour vous. So, take it away, Vint.
So my first problem is I wasn't getting the English translation, but that's okay. All right.
Okay.
Now I can hear myself.
I can translate.
There. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for having us all here. We're very excited to be part of this environment. You know that we've been building major data centers in this area. We'll talk about that later today.
Yes.
You just saw a video of Google Glass, and I'm not going to come out with flaming torches and all kinds of other things. But I want you to have a little idea of what this is about. First of all, this is no different functionally than strapping your mobile to your forehead, except this is a lot more comfortable than
more trim, yeah.
doing that. But it has the same properties. It has a video camera, or it's a camera, it can take still shots or video.
And this is actually a little screen here.
There's a little screen here that I can look up to. So it's not blocking my view of you, but I have to look up into the screen. It's like a relatively large size screen like this one here, with relatively low resolution. But it is intended to allow you to see what the computer is trying to tell you. We'll give you a demonstration in a minute. The other thing which is important is, and the reason this is such an interesting experiment, is that it is taking a computer and allowing it to see what you see and hear what you hear. And this means it becomes a partner in the visual and the audio environment that you're living in. So it's not just a tool, it's actually a partner that's there with you. It doesn't need a keyboard because you tell it what you want it to do. So it can hear my voice and respond to that. So
let's
maybe
try
we
that.
should
Let's try
maybe
with that
we should
hearing
try
your voice.
that.
Try that.
Now, there on the side is a little touch panel like you would use with one of your laptops or a touch screen. So when I tap it, I get its attention, and I'm going to ask it now, okay, Glass, who is the Prime Minister of Belgium? Oh, it didn't get that. Hold on. Google, who is the Prime Minister of Belgium? There he is. That's the right answer. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, Glass, Google, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1913? And that's the right answer, Henri Lafontaine.
I told you. I told you.
Okay, let's do one more. Okay, Glass, take a picture. Gotcha. So now you're on camera. But it's
Let's see
only
if it
one
goes
shot.
up.
We could do video. Is it going to pick it up? Let's see what happens. Or is it going to get stuck? You can tell this is a real demo because sometimes the software gets stuck. So we weren't faking.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, I think that's the camera that's live. So, all right.
Okay.
No, we're honest
But it really
about
works.
these things.
Ça marche vraiment.
So anyway.
D'accord. Bon, alors let's continue so we can find out a little bit more about you.
Okay.
You created.
Hey, wait a minute.
TC
We don't get to say one more
sure.
thing about the Google Glass? Can I please tell you?
Yes, absolutely. Go.
Or are you going to get to that?
No, the potential applications.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
Do
Okay.
it.
You got to keep these guys straight. I want you to think for just a minute about what this could mean to people with disabilities. Imagine now we have a blind German speaker, and we have a deaf sign language speaker. They're both wearing Google Glass. Let's see what happens. The German speaker says, "Guten Abend, ich heiße Vint Cerf." And of course, the deaf guy hears nothing, but the Google Glass's microphone hears the German, transcribes it into text, translates it into English, and displays it as a caption on the display here so the deaf person can read it. Now, the deaf person responds by signing, but the blind guy can't see that. But the Google Glass's video camera sees the signing, translates it into English text, translates the English text into German, and then speaks the German with a bone conduction system that goes straight into the blind guy's ear through bone conduction. So both of them are now communicating with each other. The wonderful thing is we can actually almost do all of that.
Except for the sign language.
Well, the sign language we're still working on.
How far down the line is that?
I don't think we're more than a few years away from that.
Yeah.
It's going
fast.
It's within engineering feasibility. So that's why I'm so excited. And that's why 6,000 of these are in use today. They're prototypes. We have people all over the world exploring applications to use with this technology.
Et j'avais une question pour vous, en plus. Et si vous avez aussi des questions, on aura des micros plus tard pour poser des questions si vous voulez. Et une question que posent beaucoup de gens sur cette idée de Google Glass, c'est la vie privée, c'est la confidentialité, it's privacy. How do you address that?
So, several ways. First of all, social conventions should be adopted that allow people to say, please don't start taking pictures without asking me first. You remember, well, you wouldn't remember literally. In 1900, Kodak introduced a camera called the Brownie camera. It was the first consumer camera that you could carry around. And some of the first photographs that were taken of women at the beach by men. Now, you remember in the 1900s, the style of swimming wear was full dress, but it was still an outrage, and there were people who complained about this. Eventually, we adopted social conventions about when it was okay and when it was not okay to take pictures.
So you think it'll be the same way with
I
Google
think that
Glass?
we will learn social conventions for things like this.
Okay, if you have other questions, let us, si vous avez des autres questions là-dessus, posez-les un tout petit peu plus tard. Mais let's move on to why are you one of the fathers of the internet? There's something that has to do with TCP/IP. And
what's that?
Exactly. Let's try to give it the elevator pitch version, because you could probably lecture about this all night.
I've been lecturing about this for 40 years. So the simple story is that the internet is kind of like an electronic postcard system. So every little packet in the internet is like a postcard with to addresses and from addresses and some content.
Kind of like what Otlet and La Fontaine did 100 years ago.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
So the one layer of protocol called the Internet Protocol is what allows us to send these electronic postcards through the system. You don't know how they are routed, just like you don't know how postcards are routed. But they don't necessarily arrive in order. So there's another layer of protocol, the TCP part, Transmission Control Protocol. Its job is to deal with reordering if the packets have gotten out of order, to retransmit if some of them haven't arrived, and to filter out duplicates. And so these two layers, TCP and IP, are the core of the internet. Everything else either supports it, underlying transmission technology, radio, satellite, optical fiber, or something on top uses it. So the World Wide Web is another layer of protocol on top of TCP/IP. And that, of course, is what many of us use every single day.
So you developed this in the 1970s.
1973 was when the first design was done, 40 years ago.
40 years. And 40 years later, now we have data centers stocking this massive information because chaque minute, il y a 100 heures de vidéos de YouTube qui sont stockées. Chaque minute. Alors, c'est une raison pour laquelle il faut construire ces centres de data centers, de stockage de données. How big do you see this getting? It could be infinite.
There are 3 billion people using the internet today. My title at Google, by the way, is Chief Internet Evangelist, which means I have another 4 billion people to convert to get to the full 7 billion. I could use some help. And by 2050, there'll be 9 billion people on the planet. So there's still lots of work to be done. We need to keep building data centers just to keep up with the demand for access to information, the generation of information, and the use of information.
Vint, let's take a look. On va regarder un peu plus près à cette idée, il y a 100 ans, de mondialement qui préserve cette tradition.
There it is, yes.
Et voilà. This is the data center, right? Ça, c'est le centre de stockage. Et on va apprendre un peu plus tout à l'heure. But on va regarder une vidéo sur mondialement de ce que Jean-Paul en a parlé, et on va en parler davantage après cette vidéo.
En termes de référencement, effectivement, Paul Otlet et La Fontaine, et surtout Paul Otlet, ont inventé une façon de classifier le monde, de classer le monde, qui s'appelle la classification décimale universelle, la CDU. Donc on imagine, effectivement, d'aucuns imaginent que c'est un moteur de recherche sur papier qui donnera plus tard le moteur de recherche informatique.
Google a fait un partenariat avec le mondialement parce qu'on a vu ensemble que c'était un Google de papier il y a 100 ans. Donc les gens qui ont fait le mondialement il y a 100 ans travaillaient sur la même problématique que Google. Ils travaillaient pour faire accessible l'information et pour le faire assembler dans une façon où tout le monde avait accès.
Le fait aussi que la culture aujourd'hui s'appuie de plus en plus sur ces technologies nous ont laissé croire qu'une rencontre devait s'engager sur un territoire privilégié. Et donc cette passerelle, ce grand écart entre les grands artistes d'hier, mais qu'on peut étudier à travers les technologies d'aujourd'hui et ces innovations technologiques qui peuvent aussi éclairer de certaines manières le patrimoine. Mais c'est vraiment sur cette passerelle que se dressera le projet Mons 2015.
C'est aussi important, je crois, pour la région de trouver que l'avenir de l'informatique, de l'Internet, les aide à faire la conversion de l'industrie traditionnelle dans cette région à l'industrie du futur.
Mesdames et messieurs, je vous présente les deux vedettes de cette vidéo. Bill Atkinson, qui est le responsable des affaires communautaires pour Google Belgique, et Jean-Paul de Plus, encore une fois.
Jean-Paul,
It's me again.
Et Bill, merci de nous avoir aidés avec le Google Glass. Dites-nous, d'abord, parlons du passé, les racines de ce partenariat. Comment est-ce que ça s'est développé entre Google et le Google d'il y a 100 ans?
D'abord, il est important, je pense, Bill, de signaler que c'est agréable de constater que dans ce monde plein de technologies, ce sont des hommes qui peuvent encore se parler et créer des grands dessins, avoir vraiment le regard tourné vers l'avenir. Bon, ça, je tenais à le souligner. Donc, simplement, il y a deux hommes qui s'entendent. Il y a surtout des équipes qui travaillent d'une façon tout à fait exceptionnelle.
Et c'est une petite équipe.
Et c'est une petite équipe, effectivement, au mondialement. Oui, chez Google aussi, effectivement. Et donc, deux petites équipes se rencontrent. Je tiens à saluer, évidemment, toute cette équipe. Charlotte, qui est la directrice, et Delphine Genard, qui est vraiment l'âme et celle qui anime ce partenariat. Merci de faire tout ça pour nous. Mais donc, on s'est rencontrés sur ce segment de l'histoire.
Qui a découvert la première personne?
Si tu me permets, je crois me souvenir que c'est le journal Le Monde, un journal français, Le Monde, qui vient à Mons, découvre le mondialement et titre à Mons un Google de papier. Bon. Et donc ce journal réputé français, ce qui est un peu paradoxal quand on connaît l'histoire un peu chahutée de Google en France, et donc c'est ce journal qui, à un moment donné, je suppose, attire aussi l'attention de Google Belgique, de Google Benelux sur le mondialement. La rencontre se fait, les équipes s'entendent et les premières manifestations se mettent en place.
Ça remonte à 2 ans, je crois, qu'on s'est rencontrés à Bruxelles. Et puis je suis venu ici, je me souviens, j'ai visité le mondialement et ça m'a beaucoup étonné parce que c'était un grand espace, un bel espace. Et c'était aussi le lien entre ce qu'on fait maintenant chez Google et ce qu'il y avait il y a 100 ans. On voyait ou je craignais que les Européens pensent toujours que l'Internet c'est américain, mais en fait, beaucoup de ces pionniers étaient européens, et Vint peut en parler plus, mais donc il y a 2 ans, et au début, je crois, presque au début de notre rencontre, on a commencé les petites conférences et les petites expositions. Et l'équipe de mondialement m'a dit, est-ce que vous pourriez amener Vint Cerf ici à Mons? Et j'ai dit, je peux. Et je disais, je ne pourrais pas promettre, mais bon, au fil et à mesure que notre partenariat s'agrandissait, je parlais plus avec Vint et je suis content qu'il soit là.
Et Vint, quand est-ce que vous avez été au courant de ce passé d'il y a 100 ans, de ce Google sur papier?
So actually, I knew nothing about this until Bill brought it to my attention. But I did want to mention that there's an intermediate thing which I find equally interesting. The mondialement idea takes the technologies of the time and projects them into this brilliant and amazing potential using whatever was available at the time. And even pushing the limits and imagining things. There was another technology that was suggested but never implemented. It was called the Memex, and the man that wrote about it in 1945 in the Atlantic Monthly was Vannevar Bush. The article was called As We May Think. And his notion was to use microfilm and some television-like displays in order to call up information whenever you needed it. And so in a sense, he's reaching for using the technologies of the time. 30 years later, we come across the beginnings of the internet, and 40 years later, the beginnings, actually 50 years later, we get to the World Wide Web in widespread use that all of us use every day.
And what's important, we were talking about how there were many Europeans involved in that, even Belgians.
In my laboratory at Stanford, I had people from Norway, from Japan, from England, and from France, and eventually from Germany and Italy, who participated in the very early stages of the development, both of the internet and before that at UCLA in the ARPANET. So although the funding came from the American Defense Department, the ideas came from a lot of different places.
And so it's a two-way street, parce qu'on voit en ce moment, il y a ce concept d'un cultural institute online que Google est en train de développer. Bill,
oui, exactement.
Mondialement, c'est le premier partenaire belge là-dessus.
Donc il y a deux expositions qui sont sur
l'Internet, sur le Google Cultural Institute, qui sont aussi, je crois, sur La Fontaine et aussi une sur la paix ou le prix Nobel.
Au moins une sur Otley et au moins une sur La Fontaine.
Voilà, et les femmes aussi, je crois. Donc c'était, mais surtout, je dirais que le mondialement nous aide à s'intégrer ici davantage, ici à Mons, et nous essayons de travailler avec eux pour faire connaître ce qui s'est passé avec le mondialement dans le monde entier. Donc, il y a les pionniers partout en Europe. Il y a en Espagne, il y a 100 ans, il y avait un pionnier qui avait créé la première machine aux échecs en Ukraine, en Israël, en Hongrie, en Angleterre, Bletchley Park. Et maintenant, mondialement fait partie de ce réseau européen des pionniers de l'informatique de l'Internet.
Et parmi les pionniers sont M. Odlet et M. Lafontaine. Et ça, c'est l'affiche que vous allez présenter.
We have a present for you. Voilà, ce sont les schémas. Voilà, ce sont les schémas, mais on les connaît bien pour ceux qui fréquentent le mondialement à Mons, mais peut-être pourriez-vous afficher dans vos bureaux à Londres ou en Californie ce témoignage du mondialement.
Ça, c'est il y a 100 ans. Ça, c'est il y a 100 ans.
Plus de 100 ans même.
Plus de 100 ans, et on montre déjà une sorte de World Wide Web avec les ponts qui sont construits entre les
ce sont des
continents.
This is amazing. Yes, le réseau universel. This is fabulous.
Incroyable.
Oui. C'est vous qui avez continué le travail, en quelque sorte.
Voilà, exactement. Ouais.
So something very important, though, and that is that oh, thank you, Mr. I'll tell you roll that up. One thing that I hope we will do is not stay focused only on the past. This is telling us something about the richness of human imagination. I would like this partnership between the mondialement and Google to look also towards the future and to stimulate us to take existing and anticipated technologies and put them to work the way these guys wanted to do.
Exactement. We're really working in that direction.
Good.
Because what we're doing is bringing also speakers here to Mons that talk about present internet issues. There's been, from France, the speaker spoke about privacy on the internet. We've spoken about web freedom, things we're going to speak about later.
Robert Caillot was there, also the co-inventor of the World Wide Web.
He was invited by the mondialement too, Robert Caillot.
Excellent.
Et donc, en plus, mondialement et cet effort de Google Cultural Institute, en fait, c'est partout dans l'Europe. Vous avez il y a un réseau de patrimoine européen en ligne.
Et donc, effectivement, les gens de Jean-Paul est allé à Londres présenter le mondialement devant ce partenariat dans une grande conférence je crois
London Science
Museum au mois de juin, et on va continuer dans les mêmes efforts. Et ce qui est étonnant, c'est qu'on trouve que je poste sur le Europe blog de Google, ces posts reçoivent des milliers de lecteurs, beaucoup plus intéressés que les autres choses qu'on met en ligne. C'est étonnant.
Et il faut que je mentionne aussi qu'il y a deux descendants de M. Odlet et M. Lafontaine. Est-ce qu'on peut montrer Monsieur Paul Odlet et Monsieur Pierre. Attendez.
Où est-ce qu'il est, Monsieur Odlet?
Bernard Odlet. Bonjour.
Il est là.
Bernard Odlet et Patrick Lafontaine.
Levez-vous.
C'est une grande inspiration de voir, vous les descendants, que j'admire ce qu'ils ont fait et je pense qu'il faut toujours garder ce souvenir et c'est ça qu'on fait sur Google. À ce point-ci, je voudrais voir s'il y a des commentaires de... voyons.
Il y a des commentaires. I want to just suggest to you. There's a phrase that Hillary Clinton used during the run-up to the millennium, from 99 to 2000. She and Bill Clinton had these millennium evenings, and the theme was honor the past and imagine the future, which is what I hope you will do at the mondialement. Yes.
Voyons, le mondialement, il y a une question online. Le mondialement est-il devenu le centre du monde grâce à Google? De Bertrand à Saint-Ghislain. C'est peut-être un peu de l'hyperbole ou qu'est-ce que vous pensez, Jean-Paul?
Oui, on aimerait peut-être devenir un jour le centre du monde, quoique c'est un peu immodeste de penser ça. Non, je pense que même Otley Lafontaine ne voulait pas devenir le centre du monde. Il voulait que ce monde soit tourné vers l'extérieur. C'est exactement le but que nous poursuivons aussi, c'est de rendre tout ça à un maximum de personnes.
OK. Et j'avais aussi une question que j'ai eue un peu plus tôt aujourd'hui. Il y a une question de Daniel de Saint-Symphorien qui demande « Pensez-vous que les voitures autonomes aient réellement un avenir ?» Qu'est-ce que vous pensez, Vint?
Driverless cars. Yes. would you like me to elaborate?
It's another evening lecture, I guess. Right?
Well, fortunately, not quite so bad. The vice president, the former vice president of General Motors Research, told me point blank when he read about the Google self-driving cars that we would all be safer on the road if the cars drive themselves because they don't get distracted. There's a LiDAR which is going 360 degrees. It has good GPS location. It's got a camera to tell whether the signal's doing. It doesn't get road rage. All it wants to do is get from point A to point B safely. So we are very proud of what we have accomplished. The cars at Google have driven 500,000 miles in the city of San Francisco on their own without any accidents. And if someone tells you there was an accident, they are correct. One time when a human was driving the car, someone rear-ended him. That was it.
Miraculeux. Bill Atkinson et Jean-Paul, merci beaucoup de nous avoir joints.
Merci
beaucoup.
Au revoir.
À bientôt.
S'il vous plaît.
Yes, thank you.
Parlons un peu plus on pourrait dire peut-être les héros inconnus ou mal connus, pas assez connus. Il y a beaucoup de visages et de personnages qui sont derrière ces technologies ici, dans la région, à Saint-Ghislain, à Mons. Alors, avant qu'on fait connaître ces personnes, regardons d'abord à cette vidéo de ces personnages qui sont derrière la technologie chez Google ici.
Why do I work for Google? It's a good question.
Google is a fascinating company doing very interesting things. It's changing the world in one way or another.
Pour un informaticien, Google, c'est une mine d'or, quoi.
C'est une entreprise jeune et dynamique qui prend soin de ses employés et l'ambiance de travail est très chouette.
On ne se prend pas trop au sérieux, même si on est sérieux dans notre travail.
Ik heb hier een aantal sterktes bij mezelf ontdekt, waar ik me voorheen niet van bewust was. En Google biedt ook de mogelijkheid om gebruik te maken van die sterktes.
Bien sûr, une opportunité chez Google, justement, c'est l'évolution.
You can propose solutions, you can propose things to work on, and in most cases you will get a support.
doit être plutôt pluridisciplinaire que grand spécialiste du dernier domaine, quoi.
On cherche des gens qui n'ont pas nécessairement d'expérience en informatique, mais qui sont prêts à relever le défi et venir travailler avec nous. Ça va de ce profil-là jusqu'au profil ingénieur système relativement spécialisé qui va gérer pour nous des projets et ce genre de choses, quoi. En passant aussi par des gestionnaires d'équipe et ce genre de choses-là, quoi. Ce qu'on demande, c'est des gens avec l'enthousiasme, le dynamisme, qui savent s'intégrer dans la culture de l'entreprise et qui sont volontaires, qui ont envie d'apprendre et qui ont envie de bouger et qui disent ce qu'ils pensent.
Je vous présente Freddy Bonhomme et Frédéric Descamps, les gestionnaires du centre de données Data Storage Center à Saint-Julien.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir Fred. Bonjour. Alors, parlons un peu on va montrer quelques images à l'intérieur de ce centre de stockage, mais c'est ahurissant combien ça grandit. Tout à l'heure, j'avais mentionné comment on stocke 100 heures de vidéos de YouTube chaque minute. Et combien Google a grandi d'un prototype en garage avec Sergey Brin and Larry Page, et c'est devenu absolument immense. En 15 ans, l'anniversaire, c'était le mois dernier.
Ouais, c'est un bruit.
Pourriez-vous un peu nous faire découvrir ce qu'il y a ici à Saint-Julien? Il y a un investissement de 250 millions d'euros.
Oui, qui est actif et opérationnel.
Oui, et puis ça ira jusqu'où?
Je ne sais pas. La prochaine étape, c'est on rajoute 300 millions et un autre data center.
Donc plus d'un demi-milliard d'euros que Google investit ici.
Tout à fait, oui.
Et c'est le plus grand investissement en Belgique?
Pour l'instant, oui.
Et ça ira jusqu'où? On ne sait pas.
Ça, on verra. Il y a encore de la place, donc j'espère qu'on aura l'occasion de continuer à s'étendre, quoi.
Voilà où ça a commencé. Un peu. Mais, soit tu m'as dit, Vint, que ça, c'est pas le premier centre, ça, c'est pas le premier Internet qu'ils ont découvert. C'était même avant. C'était où?
Well, first of all, it wasn't internet. This was actually Google, right? Remember, there's internet, there's the World Wide Web, then comes Google on top of that. But Larry, let's keep the layering straight here.
Il faut commencer avec Burning Man. Burning Man, c'était le... Non?
There will be a final exam on Friday.
Okay.
Larry and Sergey started their work in a dorm room at Stanford University with borrowed computers. And their plan was to index the entire World Wide Web. And of course, everybody thought they were crazy. And maybe they were, but it worked. And they had to expand into a garage. Now they've had to expand all around the world. And thanks to these two and their staff, a huge facility is right here.
On a quelques images qu'on peut montrer, non, de ce centre de stockage. En attendant, il y a combien vous avez 180 employés, c'est ça?
180 personnes qui travaillent dans le premier data center qui est opérationnel. Mais ça veut dire qu'il y a des employés Google et des third parties qui nous aident dans la gestion quotidienne du data center.
Il y a principalement deux grands groupes d'activités, les activités qui sont liées à l'entretien des serveurs.
Il y a toutes sortes de professions, non?
Oui, parce qu'en fait, on ne fait pas que l'entretien des serveurs, on fait toute la maintenance du bâtiment, de l'infrastructure électrique, le refroidissement, on filtre de l'eau du canal pour utiliser comme eau d'appoint pour le refroidissement, qui permet justement de ne pas utiliser des ressources d'eau potable, en fait.
Qu'est-ce qu'on voit là? Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Ça, c'est l'intérieur d'une rangée de serveurs et c'est là où l'air chaud est canalisé pour être finalement refroidi et réinjecté dans le data center.
Et donc, il y a 20 postes qui sont ouverts en ce moment.
Oui, 10 personnes du côté IT et plus ou moins 10 techniciens du côté facilities.
Et quand vous ajoutez cet investissement de 300 millions d'euros, ça va augmenter jusqu'à où? Combien de plus
Ça va augmenter au fur et à mesure de l'établissement des serveurs dans le nouveau bâtiment, quoi.
Ça dépend de combien vous mettez sur YouTube, ça va avoir une fonction là-dessus. Et puis... aussi, mais aussi en ce moment, il y a 350 personnes qui sont en train de construire ce nouveau
ça va jusqu'à des pics. On a eu un pic où il y avait 1000 personnes sur le site, quoi, construction et gestion opérationnelle. Donc ça varie largement.
Et il faut dire aussi que malgré qu'on a un data center qui n'est pas vieux, on continue à faire des modernisations et des améliorations pour avoir une meilleure efficacité et une meilleure disponibilité en fait sur le réseau, quoi.
Vint, ça doit être absolument ahurissant de voir comment ça a développé pour vous, hein. Vous n'auriez pas pu imaginer.
Sorry,
Pardon. Too many languages, I think.
This is the delay in translation. That's right. I don't want to look too stupid. So, first of all, 2 points. Point number 1, we will not leave the equipment in the data center alone. We will keep advancing it and updating it. We've been doing this for all the years that Google has been in existence. So even if the building is more or less fixed, its content and interior are going to continue to change as more technology comes out, as more numbers of little cores get into the chips, more power capability is provided. So that's point number 1. But I want everyone in this audience to understand something about the way the data centers work. The information that you and I put into Google, whether it's email or docs or other things that we use Google for, that information is distributed across many data centers. And so the team here in Mons has to work hand in hand with everyone else around the Google world in order to make sure that no matter what happens, the user's information is retained in a reliable way.
Et pourquoi on ne peut pas tous y aller? Je ne peux pas vous inviter tout le monde à y aller? Pourquoi? Pourquoi c'est top secret?
C'est un environnement industriel déjà, hein? Donc ça n'a pas été conçu pour le public et la promenade. Il fait chaud, il y a du bruit, il y a une densité de matériel informatique et autres assez forte. Et c'est, par exemple, les arêtes au niveau des serveurs, des racks, tout ça, c'est pas arrondi, par exemple, d'accord? Donc, si vous passez un peu trop près, vous pouvez vous couper, vous blesser ou quoi. Et donc, il faut faire attention. Il y a du courant en quantité relativement importante.
Et puis, comme dit Vint, c'est des choses qui appartiennent à vos usagers.
Oui, c'est la sécurité en fait des données. Des utilisateurs, on doit absolument la maintenir. Ce qui explique qu'il y a aussi, vu de l'extérieur, un service sécurité qui est assez visible de l'extérieur et permet de nous aider.
J'ai une question de online. Que pouvons-nous attendre du data center et que pouvons-nous lui apporter?
Ce qu'on peut attendre, c'est qu'il va rester disponible tout le temps, et donc les services qui sont hostés au data center vont être tout le temps disponibles pour vous, et donc ça c'est la première chose. Ce que vous voulez leur apporter, apportez-leur vos données, utilisez nos services, et voilà, c'est ça, c'est pour là qu'ils sont là.
Et puis entre Google et la communauté, il y a une sorte d'échange, n'est-ce pas? Il y a un reaching out avec il y a des bourses, il y a des...
Oui, il y a certaines donations qui se font sur base de certains critères, et on a commencé il y a 6 mois plus ou moins, et un des grants qu'on appelle est le photomaton, le pop-maton qui est à l'exposition Andy Warhol, pour laquelle on a contribué à aider à sa réalisation.
Est-ce que Lou Reed, on voit Lou Reed des Velvet Underground? Ah, ok. Bon, il faut l'ajouter, hein, parce que Lou Reed...
Donc, il y a déjà 7 projets que nous avons sponsorés au travers du système que nous avons mis en place. Il y en a d'autres que nous allons encore sponsorer cette année, et plus l'an prochain. On va aussi s'étendre plus dans la communauté et essayer de voir où on peut apporter quelque chose.
Et dernièrement, Vint, vous avez été... Okay, Vint, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm still listening to the translations. A point I would like to make is that the data center, of course, is the most significant thing that you would see physically here in Mons. But that's not the only face of Google that is engaged. Many of us spend time either here or in Brussels, and certainly in the rest of Europe.
And there's also a data center in Finland.
That's correct. There's a data center there. There's one in Ireland as well. And the point I want to make, though, is that Google wishes to and has been engaging on many different fronts. We are very interested in seeing entrepreneurs grow up in this community.
That was going to be my question, is you met with some of them today.
I did indeed. And they are, like every other collection of entrepreneurs I've ever met, excited, enthusiastic, and hopeful that their idea will turn into the next Google. And we hope so too. We would like very much to see these ideas materialize. We provide an infrastructure on top of which the entrepreneurs are building new products and services. And I can't imagine a better contribution to not only the GDP, but to individual wealth by providing this support for the creation of new products and services. And since the internet is global, when people build applications on the net, they are instantaneously able to reach markets everywhere around the world, not just locally, not just in Europe. And that's the way you leverage new ideas into major contributions to the GDP. So we are doing this not only here, but in other parts of Europe as well. In the UK, we have a whole building associated with enterprise development, for example, and we do it in France as well, and in Germany, and in Italy, and elsewhere.
Okay. Frédéric, merci beaucoup et merci. Bonne continuation avec votre staff, hein, avec votre équipe. Au revoir. Merci. Au revoir. Alors continuons avec le concept de liberté sur l'Internet. Il y a cet effort, non seulement par Google, mais par des autres, de promouvoir la liberté de l'expression, non seulement de point de vue d'expression, mais aussi économique dans le monde. Voyons cette campagne sur ce vidéo.
It is ours and it is free.
A free and open world depends on a free and open web.
And a free and open web depends on me.
Es nuestra y es libre.
自由で開放的な世界は自由で開放的なウェブになる。And a free and open web depends on me.
It is ours. It is free.
Bebas dimanfaatkan. Dunia yang terbuka dan bebas bergantung pada web yang terbuka dan bebas.
After 一个自由与开放的世界。我依靠在一个自由与开放的网络。
Depends on the free and open web. And the free and open web depends on me.
Es nuestra y es libre. A free and open world depends on a free and open web.
È un web libero aperto dipende da me.
Quite an interesting campaign. And Vint, commençons avec le côté économique, comme le web comme un moteur de l'économie du 21e siècle, qui crée des millions de postes de travail. Quel est le potentiel? Jusqu'où est-ce que ça pourrait aller? Comme visionnaire, qu'est-ce que vous voyez?
Well, first of all, if you understand that the internet, despite all the hardware we were just looking at, is really software, because none of that equipment does anything without programs. The future in the internet world is always all about software and how it gets used. So people can build in the various layers that we were talking about, new software to do new functions and to add new applications on the top. In the recent past, the big application space has been on mobiles. Hundreds of thousands of applications developed by people who in many cases were not necessarily trained programmers. So what is happening is that as these infrastructures build up and as they are becoming more simplified, a wider and wider audience of people can build new applications.
Mais ça s'est fait par des PME, des petites et moyennes entreprises. Ce n'est pas des grands. Enfin, ça fait partie, bien sûr. Mais je pense que la plupart de ces emplois sont créés sans doute par ces SMEs, PME, qui peuvent profiter du web, de l'Internet. N'est-ce pas?
In fact, the startups of the world are where most of the job growth comes from. Voilà. Small and medium-sized businesses are the core of job growth. And so, considering the economic situation in various parts of Europe, I can't think of anything more important than enabling small and medium-sized businesses to start and to grow, to provide them with the technical infrastructure that they need, and provide them with capital that they need, provide them with people with the right kind of training that they need. And that means marketing, sales, finance, engineering, software development, operations, all of that is absolutely critical.
Et le potentiel ici en Europe avec ce qu'on veut développer, cette économie unique, ce marché unique en Europe, donne beaucoup de potentiel pour cela, et aussi cette économie numérique qui laisse ces PME à faire du commerce partout en Europe, hein, l'Europe des 28 et même plus loin, n'est-ce pas?
I'm sorry about the delay. This is like being on the moon and waiting for the delay to come back. No offense, the translators are doing a very good job. Let me offer you a little tidbit from a conversation I had with Neelie Kroes not too long ago.
Commissaire européenne.
Oui. She was talking about the single European market, which is a very important concept. But I begged her to be careful that whatever rules were produced for this common European market, that the companies that are participating in them not be constrained to function only within the European market. In order for them to participate in the global market, which is much bigger, we have to make sure the rules are conducive to globalization. Otherwise, they won't have the space to grow that they deserve.
J'aurais plein de questions pour toi, Vint, et je veux poser aussi sur la surveillance et PRISM et cet aspect-là, mais je veux aussi l'ouvrir à des questions de vous et aussi online. Donc, est-ce qu'il y aurait une question maintenant par quelqu'un? OK, en attendant, il y a une question online. Est-ce que Google collabore avec les écoles pour susciter des vocations et créer des carrières? De Georges Louis.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolument.
Absolument.
Yeah.
Absolutamente.
Yeah, there we go. First of all, Google and another organization called the Association for Computing Machinery, which has an existence here in Europe, ACM Europe, are working together to help train thousands of teachers to teach computer science in the secondary schools in preparation for college-level courses. And I'm very proud to tell you, I'm the president of ACM, and so I am a big fan of this kind of partnership. Okay. So that's point number one. And the second one is that we mentioned before, we are working to stimulate entrepreneurial thinking and capacity all around in Europe. And again, education is the absolute core of all the success that we hope for.
On me dit qu'il y a une question derrière une caméra.
Ici. Allô.
Elle est où?
Oui.
Et le micro,
voilà, en fait...
S'il vous plaît, comment vous appelez-vous?
Leandro.
Oui.
Oui. Voilà, en fait, j'ai une question par rapport à la vie privée. Donc, vous parlez de prisme. Donc, on connaît un peu le lien...
Un peu plus fort parce que je vous entends pas.
On connaît le lien qu'il y a eu entre Prism et Google. Oui. Lorsque vous avez entamé le débat là-dessus, au début, vous avez parlé de légiférer. Oui. Seulement, on sait que, par exemple, Google a des data centers, notamment aux États-Unis, en Europe. Lorsqu'on sait qu'aux États-Unis, les lois sont vraiment différentes et c'est extrêmement difficile de légiférer, surtout d'un continent à un autre. Notamment quand on connaît, je pense que c'est le Patriot Act aux États-Unis. Oui. Donc, on se dit par exemple que ça tient qu'à Google, en fait, de pouvoir justement protéger la vie privée de ses utilisateurs. Mais comment la société peut se positionner entre, par exemple, les États-Unis, avec leur législation, l'Europe et bien sûr les pays émergents qui arrivent?
Très bonne question que j'allais poser moi-même et je suis content que vous l'avez posée, donc je n'ai pas besoin de le faire.
J'aurais fait gagner du temps.
Voilà, donc Vint, what's your take on that? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez?
So let me respond. First of all, if you are not following what's happening in the United States, One of the congressmen who helped author the Patriot Act, Jim Sensenbrenner, has now authored a proposed constraint on the scope of the work that can go on under the Patriot Act, and it's showing up in both the Senate and in the House. So that's an author of that original legislation is saying that it should not be interpreted in the way that it has. So that's point number one. Google has, of course, no control over what is legislated, but I want to assert absolutely and firmly that there is no direct connection between any of the Google facilities and any of the intelligence agencies, either in the US or elsewhere. And I can make that statement with great confidence for the simple reason that we build our own hardware, we run our own underlying networks, and we write our own software. And so we know what is there and we know what is not there.
Mais quand le gouvernement américain vient à votre porte et dit « Ah, je veux voir ce qu'il y a là-dedans », qu'est-ce que vous dites?
Yes. So under the law, not only in the United States, but in other parts of the world, governments are permitted to demand information with court orders. And we adhere to that practice. So if we get a court order demanding information from either an agency in the US government, a law enforcement agency, or the intelligence agencies, or we get a demand from another country, which we do get, we respond, but before we respond, we verify that that court order is valid. It is examined by a team of attorneys in our headquarters in all cases. When they come from non-US sources, they go through something called a multilateral assistance treaty, which is a process for getting those requests in front of the target.
Donc vous défendez les données de vos utilisateurs, en fait. Vous défendez.
Absolutely. In fact, we push back, even at some expense. In some cases, we go to court to say this is too big a demand. We think that it is unnecessary and overreaching, and we will fight that. It's clear why we have to do that. If we don't protect our users' information, we won't have any users. We know that, and so we are very motivated to push back wherever we have to and can.
Et puis il n'y en aurait pas de la liberté de l'Internet comme on a vu sur la vidéo juste maintenant. Il y a une autre question, un peu une sorte de autre sujet. Pensez-vous que l'économie collaborative basée sur les valeurs d'Internet, comme le partage et la transparence, sera à l'origine d'une ère post-capitaliste? Oh. Ça pourrait être un sujet une longue conférence, non? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez?
Well, first of all, I'm an engineer, and so this is an economic question, and so you deserve the answer I'm going to give you. In fact, the internet is a transforming technology because it changes the economics of many businesses. And because the digital economics is so different, the cost of replication, the cost of distribution changes the fundamental business models.
Creative destruction.
It is creative destruction. And if the companies cannot adapt to this change in economics, they may not survive. This is what Darwin taught us. Darwin said you only have two choices. Either you adapt or you die. And we learn this lesson as the economics change. But it's big, huge opportunity.
Et comme vous dites, il y a plus de postes de travail ou d'emplois qui sont créés que détruits par l'Internet.
For every job which is let us say, removed from necessity by Internet, on the order of 2 or 2.5 jobs get created because somebody has to write the software, has to operate the systems, has to build and maintain them, and then new businesses are created on top of that, and that creates new jobs as well. The same thing happened in the Industrial Revolution. The jobs changed over time. So now we have a big issue, which is to retrain people in order to take those new jobs.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions dans l'audience à poser? Monsieur, oui, s'il vous plaît. Oui?
The microphone is on its way.
Ah, d'accord.
Does this mean everybody who gets the microphone gets to ask a question before it gets to...
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, right. S'il vous plaît, et comment vous appelez-vous?
Mon nom est Geoffrey.
Et vous êtes ici à De Mons ou...
Non, je suis de Bruxelles.
OK.
Voilà. Ma question pour Vinton, c'est plus... vous avez inventé un protocole qui permet aux gens de communiquer. Quelle est la première chose que les gens ont faite et quelle est surtout la première chose que les gens ont commencé à faire dans l'autre sens que vous l'avez prévu? Donc vous avez prévu un protocole qui permet aux gens de parler ensemble. Mais quelle a été la meilleure... Enfin, quelle a été la façon dont les gens ont détourné votre protocole et comment est-ce que vous avez réagi à ce moment-là?
Ah, bonne question.
Well, actually, they didn't bypass the protocol. They used it, and they built on top of it. And so the basic protocols are still at the heart of the Internet. I'm not sure whether you were going in a different direction and asking, what about the people that use the Internet to do abusive things? For example, stalking or fraud, committing fraud, or stealing people's identities and things like that. This is the frustrating thing about creating a capability and giving it to the world, knowing that as soon as the general public have access to it, some parts of the general public will abuse the use of the system. This just happens because people are people. There are only 3 ways to deal with this problem. First way is to find technology that literally prevents some of the bad things from happening. Cryptography is an example of that kind of thing. Make things confidential by using cryptographic communication. But sometimes you can't actually prevent a bad thing from happening, so what can you do? Well, the next thing you can do is to say, in our society, the following things are considered unacceptable, socially unacceptable. If we catch you doing them, there will be consequences. That's what laws and law enforcement are about. Notice, if we catch you, that's the best we can do. We cannot guarantee to catch everyone who does a bad thing, but we can tell them that we are looking for them and that we will prosecute if we catch them. But then there's a third response, and all of these have to operate in concert. The third one is literally moral suasion. Don't do that. It's the wrong thing to do. It hurts people. All 3 of those things are at our beck and call, and they are all 3 being applied. And we still have a lot of work to do to make all 3 of those things effective to make this environment safer and more reliable for every one of us.
Et peut-être sur un niveau international aussi, parce que peut-être qu'il n'y a pas assez de coordination internationale. Il y a une autre question, il paraît, là-bas. Mademoiselle, oui?
Hello, well, let me ask you in English. I'm Kasia Ghosh from VoIP Telecom Company. I'm concerned about the privacy, so I would like to kindly ask you, does Google as a company takes any measures in order to prevent intelligence agencies of other countries than US to take any data or to enter even those data centers? Not so long time ago, we had a case that in Washington, apparently the bomb was introduced by an employee of the supplier. So there is a big range of people who can enter and use data in not wished way by Google.
Okay.
So can Google prevent, does Google take any measures to prevent and protect our privacy?
I think you addressed that a little bit earlier, but maybe you could go further into how you do that.
Let me say, first of all, the answer is yes, although I don't want you to hear absolutely 100%. No engineer will ever tell you that they can absolutely guarantee anything. but engineers do as much as they can. Here's what Google does. We turned on cryptography for all the connections going from your machine to our data centers. That's what HTTPS means. It means secure, it means encrypted traffic. So any of your traffic going back and forth is encrypted. If anyone sees it in between, they would have to break the cryptography. We are increasing the key sizes of the cryptography in order to make it harder for someone to break the cryptography. That's point number one. The second point, with regard to email in particular, when we move data from one data center to another, when we move email from one data center to another, we encrypt that traffic, and we will increase that practice as time goes on. The third thing that we've been doing is providing people with better quality authentication tools. I'm not wearing my Google ID badge with me, but it has a cryptographic chip in it. And I have to use that little chip every time I log in at Google in order to generate what we call a one-time password. We make that capability available to any general user who wants to. So you can have two-factor authentication, a cryptographic algorithm in your mobile, or a little chip that you plug into your computer. There are a raft of other things that we are pursuing to help users enable them to protect themselves. Browsers, which are paranoid, that are try very hard to detect any malware that might show up, any badware, and not let you execute it. We look for sites on the internet that have malware in them, and we warn you, if you go there, not to go to that destination because you may ingest a piece of malware. So Google is very conscious of the importance of helping people protect themselves and providing them with tools to do so, and we will continue to do that.
Got another question. Est-ce qu'il y en a dans le... Ah, oui, monsieur. Oui, s'il vous plaît. While the microphone comes, Vint, what is the next big thing on the internet, according to you, from Marc Delzel?
Of course, if I knew exactly what the next big thing was, I'd be off investing in it. There are, let me say, 4 big things coming. First one is increased amounts of artificial intelligence. The Google Glass and its speech understanding is just the bare beginning of making these systems understand more deeply what it is we're trying to accomplish, what tasks we're trying to do, why are we asking this question. That's one part. Of course, the self-driving cars are an example. Yeah. Interpretation of images is an example. Translation of natural languages is an example. There will be much more of that. The second thing, obviously, is mobile access to the internet. That's underway. You will see more and more radio-based stuff in the internet environment.
And data will move faster.
So yes, well, certainly speed, but I think on the Internet of Things, on the radio-based dimension, several more devices will be on the internet than there are people. The current imagining is 100 devices per person on the planet, which would mean about 700 billion things are all operating. Either it's an instrumented building that you're in, your home with an environmental control, a security system, the entertainment system being managed possibly by a third party at your request. So this Internet of Things is coming. And the last, but let me say, there are many other big things that I don't know about. Someone will invent them, maybe some of you. But the interplanetary internet is now in operation as well between Earth and Mars and the International Space Station. So I mean, these are things which are clearly underway. And you will live to see some of the things that I won't, but I'm already excited about what's coming in the next 2 decades.
Monsieur, s'il vous plaît. Vous avez le micro? Non? Oui.
Voilà. Vous prenez les données, vous les stockez, vous les gardez, mais moi je voudrais qu'on efface mes données, soit en laissant mon nom, soit en laissant ma photo, soit les deux. Et je voudrais être certain que toutes les données qui me concernent sont effacées. Donc, je souhaite qu'on me donne une procédure certifiée pour une mort informatique. Le contraire de ce que vous essayez de faire en prenant des données et encore des données. Je suis désolé.
So,
bonne question.
So first of all, let me remind you of something. Do you know what is a book? You know what a book is. You know what a library is. Do you know that some books have things in them that people wish were not there? Would you suggest that we should have people breaking into libraries and pulling books off the shelves because they don't like what's in the books? Is that what you would like? We took the microphone away. He's not able to respond. So I want to make this point very, very clear. Some information that you put into the Google system you can take out. We have something called the Data Liberation Front. Anything you put in, you can pull out. But there are things that go into the network that you didn't put in there that might involve you. Maybe someone in the audience took a picture of you and put it up on the net. We don't have control over that content. It may be on a server that is not ours. Please don't confuse the indexing of the World Wide Web with our hosting or holding of the data. We index the entire World Wide Web, but we have control only over the servers that run in our data centers. So it's not possible for Google to take away everything that you might not like. Let me tell you one other thing which makes this very difficult. Let us even imagine for a moment that you could make a list of all the things that you don't want Google to index. You realize that we run the indexing program constantly. We're crawling through the internet, indexing everything. If you wanted us to take things away from the index, we would have to remember everything you want us to forget. And pretty soon we would have to remember more things than there are things that are on the net, because we'd have to remember everything that has been taken off to make sure that if it went back, we could take it off again. It's not physically possible for us to do that. So we are going to have to evolve a different practice, and that is called social conventions. Our technology, not just Google's, but the entire internet technology has run far ahead of social conventions for appropriate use. We are going to have, you and I are going to have to live through a period of adjustment, just like the Brownie camera. Back in the 1900s, people had to learn what was socially acceptable and what was not. And those of us who are living in this transition period will experience pain from time to time. It's part of the whole process of developing new social customs. So for me, watching the younger people is really important to see what kinds of customs they are developing. And that's the world that we will end up living in.
C'est un très bon débat. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Je pense que... Voilà, monsieur, s'il vous plaît. Oui.
Hi.
Comment vous appelez-vous?
I'm Guillaume. I'm from the local Google data center. I've got a question about the free internet. We know that there's countries already in the world that don't have free access to internet, like China or Turkey in time of troubled times. Now that it's been made obvious that countries are spying on each other, which they've been doing for years, right?
Yes.
But now it's been really obvious, and big countries like Germany are trying to say, we want to fence our internet. We want our people in Germany to be free from this, from other countries spying on us. So how do you see the internet going if major countries like this are trying to segregate from the whole internet?
So,
est-ce que c'est possible?
Well, probably not. But there are side effects of what we will call balkanization or fragmentation. My friends from Estonia hate the word balkanization. So this is actually very important. Imagine for a moment that we were having this discussion about the telephone system, and we were concluding that it was terrible that anyone was tapping the telephone calls. So we should now isolate the telephone network so that it only works in each country. And no longer is it permitted to have connections that go from one country to another. Let's destroy the global telephone network because it's a risk factor. Well, I can assure you that commerce would come to a grinding halt. The same is true for internet. So it's a self-inflicted wound to try to break this apart into national boundaries. I'm actually very proud of one design principle in the internet. The little packets don't have any idea when they cross an international boundary. They can't see it. They have no idea. And that was a very deliberate design principle. Let us not throw the baby out with the bathwater. This system has the potential to do great good. Let's find ways of limiting either governments or individuals from doing things that we consider socially harmful without losing the tremendous potential that we have today. All the world's knowledge at our fingertips.
C'est une grande question, la gouvernance de l'Internet. Il y a une autre question par monsieur. Voilà, monsieur. Comment vous appelez-vous?
Jean-Benoît.
Oui?
So a very brief one. Est-ce que vous pensez que les livres vont disparaître?
Là? Monsieur là?
Okay, there we are. Thank you.
Okay. Pardon.
Est-ce que les livres vont disparaître?
Ah.
I hope not, because I'm a great bibliophile. On the other hand, they will be at least augmented by electronic versions. And the reason that this is so important is that the book is a fixed medium. Digital media are far more facile and versatile. And people are going to begin to express themselves in ways that are not fixed and rigid. In fact, we will be interacting with some of these objects more and more over time. So I don't think that books will disappear, but I think they will appear in various forms. Here's a statistic for you, which I lost $10,000 on. I made a bet that by 2010, more than half of all the books that would be sold by Amazon would be electronic. I lost by 1 year because in 2011, in fact, more than half of all the books that they sold were electronic books. So this is generally the case with many new technologies. It looks like they're going to wipe something out. And what they end up doing is augmenting. Do you remember what happened with the movie industry when video cassette recorders came along? They thought, it's going to destroy the movie industry. Well, the last time I looked, the movie industry made 3 or 4 times more money from renting or selling DVDs and Blu-rays than they made in the box office. The box office is doing fine, thank you very much, but this other technology has made the business even bigger. So I'm pretty positive about this. But I still have a nice library full of real books. But I can tell you one other thing. I love it when I can go look the books up on the net, because when I stand in front of several thousand volumes and think, one of these has the thing I want in it, but I can't remember which one, having the network search for me and then tell me which volume to pull out is really helpful.
Votre propre système de La Fontaine et Monsieur Atlet.
Oui.
Quel regard portez-vous, ça c'est une question de l'Internet, du web, quel regard portez-vous en tant que pionnier de l'Internet sur le développement des réseaux sociaux?
So this is a very interesting thing because we saw the social networking effect of the Internet and its predecessor, the ARPANET, as early as 1971, when networked electronic mail was invented on the ARPANET. It was instantaneously used within 2 weeks as a social networking tool. The first distribution list that came out on the ARPANET was called Sci-Fi Lovers, Science Fiction Lovers. Now, this is not surprising. The people who were building the ARPANET were all geeks, and they all read science fiction. So the first discussion group was about science fiction authors and their novels. Guess what the second one was? It was called Yum Yum. It was a restaurant review distribution list for restaurants in the Palo Alto area and eventually spread. So I want to emphasize that social networking has been with us in this technology for a long time.
So then why didn't you think of it and not Mark Zuckerberg? You'd be a gazillionaire if you had that, right?
Listen, if I had been able to charge 1 microcent for every packet, I would be richer than any man in the entire universe.
All right.
But that was not our purpose. Our purpose was to get the technology out there so everyone could take advantage of it. So social networking, for me, has been a mixed bag. I have a Twitter account, I have a Facebook page, I have 2 Google Plus pages, among other things. And I use them, let us say, sporadically. Now, many people like the social networking environment because it gives them visibility that they might not otherwise have. And in some cases, I think that's a good thing. I think some people are overly focused on the use of the social networking. I get so much visibility, I don't need any help, thank you very much. I don't need the social networks to be visible. So I find them useful tools for staying in touch with friends, but it's easy to go overboard and spend too much time with that.
Et tout en modération, j'imagine. OK, il y a une autre question quelque part? Oui, enfin, d'abord madame et puis après monsieur.
From, yes, Narayan. There's a microphone coming somewhere.
Oui,
it's in the front
qui
here.
arrive, voilà.
Here, it's coming. You want to raise your hand, Marianne, so they can see you. There we go.
Merci, c'est vraiment un plaisir de revoir Vint ici. Je suis très intéressée par les outils de traduction de Google et en considérant l'utilisation de ces outils, notamment pour les pays en développement. Et donc j'aimerais savoir comment les utiliser au mieux et quel est leur avenir, comment on pourrait en profiter davantage en donnant cet accès justement aux personnes dans les pays en développement pour que le multilinguisme soit utilisé dans son maximum et qu'on donne la chance à chacun et chacune de s'exprimer dans sa langue. Merci.
How do you see that technology advancing? How fast can it be?
So this is really an important question, and it's a very hard problem. It's called natural language processing. Google has gone as far as any company I know of in processing natural languages and doing translations. But you should understand, you know this, so thank you for asking the question. The hard part about high-quality translation with today's tools is that you need a large corpus of documents in the 2 different languages that purport to be the same document. And if you have a lot of those, you can use statistical methods to do pretty good quality translation. We are heavily dependent on that, but we've pushed up to the limit of what these kinds of statistical methods will produce. So now we are adding semantics and syntax back into the process. For languages that we have a lot of samples for, we can do a very good job. But you were mentioning the developing world, and here we may have fewer documents available to use this method. So there is a real challenge there for the artificial intelligence community to find ways of teaching computers languages in the same way that we learn them as human beings. One of our employees at Google is a man named Ray Kurzweil. He has written some pretty challenging books, I would say even controversial books, one of which was called The Singularity is Near. He is imagining that because computers have gotten more and more powerful over time, eventually they will be able to design themselves. And at this point, they will become smarter than people. And that might be one way to solve the problem. The computers that are smarter than we are will solve the natural language problem. But he's also working on something that he's written a book about called How to Create a Mind. And his idea here is how to understand the way the brain works. And he's got some very, very interesting theories, which we don't have time to go into. But he's come to Google to try these ideas out because we're the only company in the world with enough computing capacity to actually try.
How close are we to actual interpreting in real time?
Very close. Very close. And you know, for text, we can do it almost exactly in real time. If you've ever used Google Translate with text. Translating in real time, spoken, still takes a delay. but then so does the human version. So if the computers have to be better than people at some point to do this faster.
Any other questions? Il y a des autres cas? Ah oui, monsieur, c'est vrai. Oui, s'il vous plaît. Et comment vous appelez-vous?
Je m'appelle Ignazi Guardan, j'habite à Bruxelles. Une question. Toutes les recherches de Google sont basées sur un algorithme qui est protégé comme la formule de la Coca-Cola. Donc c'est un grand secret de Google, de l'algorithme sur lequel les recherches, le résultat des recherches arrive sur l'écran des utilisateurs. Ce qui donne à Google un pouvoir énorme parce que toute notre connaissance est classifiée à travers une méthode que nous ne connaissons pas, qui est décidée par personne, qui est décidée par des mathématiciens. Comment savons-nous, pouvez-vous expliquer, sans révéler l'algorithme de Google, que je ne crois pas que ça puisse arriver ce soir à Mons, hein, ça serait bien, hein, mais sans que vous révélez ce soir l'algorithme de Google, est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer comment on peut avoir une certaine tranquillité dans le long terme, je ne parle pas d'aujourd'hui, que ce pouvoir immense de contrôle de l'information que le monde reçoit, des livres que l'on lit, de la musique qu'on écoute, des choses qu'on cherche, tout passe par une formule de laquelle on n'en sait rien. Comment est-ce qu'on contrôle ça?
Bonne question.
So this is a somewhat amusing question. So first I will tell you the secret. Are you ready?
You have the blackboard? You going to write it up on the blackboard?
I don't have to. It's a fairly simple formula. If you know anything about probability and statistics, you know about Bayes' theorem. And Bayes' theorem lies at the heart of an awful lot of what we do. For everybody else who doesn't happen to be a mathematician, basically Bayes' theorem allows us to derive information from partial information, to make decisions based on partial information. It's a very, very interesting algorithm. In the 18th century, this particular formula was developed, and we make very heavy use of that. Second, I want to make sure that you don't think that the only thing that you ever read is something suggested by Google. I don't know about you, but I don't read every novel that's written. I don't watch every movie. I don't listen to every radio program. I certainly don't read every newspaper. Somehow, you and I are filtering this information. Google could help by helping you find things, and we work very hard with our ranking algorithm in the search space to try to adapt to what you seem to think is important to you. A trivial example of this is when you do a search and we produce a list, if you don't click on the thing at the top, it means we didn't get it right. So we look to see which one you clicked on. That tells us that we should have changed some of our parameters to match your interests. So we try to adapt to the extent you permit us to do that. The more important thing, though, is that you also get a lot of other inputs that suggest to you what you should be reading or listening to or doing. I know that some of the most interesting things that I encounter are the result of friends sending me email or saying something in a blog or saying something in one of the social networks that says to me, I think you should look at this. Now, your friends probably tell you all kinds of things, and you probably have a little algorithm which you couldn't express that tells you which friends you listen to more than the others. And that's, you have your own rank order of sort of brand for which friend's advice is best to you. The closest we can come to this is to try to figure out what that algorithm should be and adapt it to you. So there's no one algorithm. It is adaptation to what we see everybody doing.
Est-ce que, je pense qu'il y a encore deux questions là-haut quelque part, si vous pourriez vous présenter. Voilà, monsieur.
Bonsoir, je m'appelle Kuznetsov Denis, étudiant de 3e année en informatique, et je voulais poser la question...
Un peu plus fort, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, désolé. Est-ce que Google prévoit investir dans les logiciels libres, comme on a pu constater il y a quelques années des Chromium? Et une deuxième question, quels sont les systèmes d'exploitation privilégiés au niveau des serveurs à ce niveau-ci aussi?
I missed that.
So, first of all, Google offers, as you know, quite a bit of free software the Android operating system in particular, which is being used now for tablets and mobiles and so on. There's also a Chrome operating system that goes with the Chromebooks that we have been developing. And of course, there's the Chrome browser itself. All of these are open source. And our purpose there is to not only enable people to build new products on top of those source code, but also to scrutinize them to find problems, bugs, and other things. We pay people who find bugs in our software so we can fix it. So that's about the free software. The second question, though, was...
J'ai raté. What, Ah, il n'a pas le micro. Il y a d'ailleurs une autre question derrière monsieur. Après lui, il y aura quelqu'un derrière lui.
I need to explain that at my age, my push-down stack is level 1.
OK, all right.
Oui, quels sont les systèmes d'exploitation privilégiés sur les serveurs Google?
Exploitation privilégiée.
Oh.
Ça, je ne comprends pas, mais peut-être que tu le comptes.
So we are running variations of Linux, basically. It's a lot, quite modified, strongly modified system. But that's our underlying operating system environment. These are virtual machines, basically, that are being run. So you have hypervisors that are part of the infrastructure. Now, this is to allow us some flexibility in running more than one kind of operating system if that needs to be done.
OK, il y a derrière, j'ai encore enfin, c'est plutôt une déclaration sur l'Internet. En parlant d'algorithmes, Vint peut-il intervenir pour que Google ne suspende plus le compte de TéléMB qui nous retransmet ce soir sur son channel YouTube? With a happy face. Je ne comprends pas non plus.
I didn't quite follow the translation. Yeah.
OK, d'accord. Il y a une autre question derrière, monsieur. Il y a une autre personne derrière.
Bonsoir.
Oui. Comment vous appelez-vous?
Je m'appelle Pierre-Henri, je travaille ici à Mons en tant que développeur. Moi, ma question, c'était plutôt... Vous êtes souvent attaqué par rapport à la vie privée, par rapport au sujet, le danger pour le sujet, tout ça. En fait, moi j'ai relativement confiance dans Google vis-à-vis de ça, mais là où j'ai plus peur, pour vous faire une métaphore, c'est que si jamais j'étais un extraterrestre et que je vais tout apprendre sur l'être humain, et si j'avais le choix entre un sujet que je peux interroger, quitte à le tabasser puis à le disséquer, et les bases de données de Google, à choisir, je pense que je prendrais plutôt les bases de données de Google. Je pense qu'à la limite, on prendrait la base de données, on effacerait mon nom et compagnie. Je reste persuadé que les conclusions que vous pouvez tirer des bases de données sont beaucoup plus puissantes que vraiment ce que vous pouvez savoir sur un sujet, un individu particulier. Donc voilà, ma question, c'est un petit peu de savoir par rapport à cette obscurité algorithmique, comment on n'a aucun contrôle, on n'a aucune façon de savoir qu'est-ce que vous faites dire à vos bases de données, puisqu'on sait très bien qu'aujourd'hui, on arrive à des algorithmes qui, sans hypothèse, arrivent à faire émerger des conclusions sur les comportements humains, que ce soit des habitudes alimentaires, culturelles, conjugales, tout et n'importe quoi. Voilà, je voulais un petit peu savoir comment vous vous positionnez par rapport à ça.
Well, let me explain what our algorithms are trying to do. We have many algorithms for doing various things. One of them is figuring out, of the 10 million responses that come back to a Google search, which one should we put first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And that's an algorithm which is tuned all the time with many different signals going in to help adjust that. Based in part on observing what other people have searched for and what their responses have been. You know, if they didn't click on the first one, this informs us not only about them, but also about all the other people who didn't click on that first response. So we can adapt and adjust the algorithm in reaction to what the mass of people is tending to do. We have other algorithms that are trying to decide which advertisements to show you. That's another set of algorithms. And there's the auction algorithm that helps to decide which ads should participate in the auction and which ads should actually be shown and in what order. So there are a lot of algorithms there. And the reason that we keep them private is twofold. The first one is that we consider those to be a very key part of our business edge. And the second thing is that if we were to make them public, people would try to game the system. They already do that anyway. And the result is a vast distortion of the results that people are really looking for. So we keep those things private, partly to protect our corporate interest and partly to protect your interest from people who are trying to game the system.
OK. Juste pour vous rappeler que si vous voulez tweeter, c'est hashtag Vint Cerf Belgium, un mot. Il y avait une autre question. Ah, je l'ai raté, vous l'avez effacé là. La question s'agissait de ma ville natale. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas des craintes qu'à Los Angeles, Google construit une maison de cinéma qui pourrait poser un grand challenge aux indépendants? Vous êtes au courant? Non? Ça, c'était la question, donc...
Well, so I used to live in Los Angeles, and I have a son who's in the movie business who lives there. I haven't heard anything about Google building a movie theater.
No, une maison, a production house.
Yeah. Producing movies?
Producing movies, yeah.
Well, I also don't know that we're doing that, but that doesn't mean we aren't. It just means I don't know. And I don't understand why that would be a bad thing.
Yeah. OK. La question, c'est voilà, c'est affiché encore une fois. Que pensez-vous des studios de cinéma que Google construit à Los Angeles? N'y a-t-il pas les pires craintes à avoir pour l'industrie cinématographique indépendante? Bon, c'est un peu ce que j'ai posé. Mais vous n'êtes pas au courant. Oh. OK. Il y a d'autres questions dans la salle? D'accord, j'aurai une autre de l'Internet aussi, que j'ai eu aujourd'hui. Daniel de Saint-Symphorien, Marco de Charleroi, que pensez-vous de Wikileaks et les révélations
I'm not
de
getting
Snowden?
any translation now.
What do you think of WikiLeaks and Snowden's revelations?
I'm sorry. I'm now getting simultaneous translations from two sides, French and English at the same time, which is really very helpful. What was your question?
So what do you think of WikiLeaks and the revelations of Snowden?
Okay, well...
Is he the modern-day Daniel Ellsberg or not? That's what I would ask.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about Snowden and WikiLeaks. And part of it has to do with the parties who released the information had made commitments not to do that. And so you have to wonder a little bit about their motives. On the other hand, I accept the argument that if someone is doing something that is thought to be harmful or in fact illegal or something, then the whistleblower idea is a powerful force to deal with that. I have very mixed feelings about these things because I'm sympathetic to
the transparency.
You could argue that, but I think it's very important that you still have an effective national security and law enforcement capability. And if everything were transparent, then you might never be able to track down people who are actually doing harm. And so if you were a law enforcement agency or a national security agency and you were told you are responsible for preventing bad things from happening, it's not okay to simply catch the bad guys. That's justice, but it's not security. So I'm not trying to apologize, or what is it called, apologia. I am not trying to argue or provide excuses, but I am trying to say that I understand and appreciate a mindset that says I have to gather all this information in order to do my job. It's possible to go overboard, and I think we are seeing that this process has gone beyond what most people are willing to accept.
Vint, on arrive vers la fin de cette soirée, je trouve passionnante, vraiment, on a beaucoup découvert avec vous. Il y a aussi cette question de censure, que selon les statistiques que je vois, c'est qu'il y a menace, il y a menace de cette censure parmi beaucoup de pays. Plus de 40 pays censurent l'Internet, ça c'est plus d'1 sur 5. Il y a des gouvernements qui prétendent de protéger le public, mais qui, tirent sur le facteur. Donc, comment est-ce que vous voyez dans l'avenir la gouvernance de l'Internet, et dans l'avenir, où est-ce que vous voyez l'Internet dans 2050, quand nous sommes 9 milliards de personnes?
Wow. Wow, okay. And you want all this in 25 words or
Oui,
less.
exact.
First of all, there is a lot of censorship. I think YouTube is censored and blocked in 42 countries around the world. I was just in China, and I could not get to YouTube, for example. On the other hand, there are 650 million Chinese on the internet. And I harbor this hope that what will happen is that over time, the Chinese government will discover either that they can't stop people from talking to each other, or that it doesn't necessarily lead to revolution, and at least the kind of overthrowing governments. And so I have this hope that over time, their huge investment in the internet, it's an enormous investment, will in fact help them move to a more democratic regime. Now that's my personal hope. I think that you will see censorship sometimes well-intended for protection of people. And once again, this is something which has two extremes. One of them is that you absolutely censor everything that anybody says, and the other extreme is everyone is free to say anything they want to, regardless of the harm that it causes. And so somewhere is a happy medium. It may not be the same for every culture, country, or person. So our comfort level for being protected is going to vary. And I think as a society, we are all going to be struggling to find where those medium points are. The other question about where will we be in 2050, 9 billion people is a good estimate of the number. I think we had better have gotten to the point that we are using renewable energy on a regular basis, because if we don't, we're in big trouble. If we have not done something about the global warming problem, we are going to be in big trouble. I think that we are also at risk of losing all of our digital information, because the software that creates it has to be retained in order to correctly interpret the digital information we create. When you create a spreadsheet, there's a program that needs to interpret the bits of the file. And if we can't preserve the operation of those programs and the operating systems that they depend on, and maybe the emulation of the hardware that the operating system sits on, if we can't preserve that meta information, then the data that we create may just be a pile of rotten bits. But that also applies to text, it applies to movies, it applies to pictures and imagery and everything else. The 22nd century may know nothing of the 21st unless we solve that problem. So I think we will have much to do to make sure that preservation of digital content is feasible for periods of hundreds to thousands of years. What we need is digital vellum, because you know that 1,000-year-old manuscripts are still readable if you happen to read Greek or Latin or maybe hieroglyphics. So there's work to be done to be in 2050 in a place that we would be comfortable in. And that's the job of many of us at Google and many of you in the audience. Homework for the students.
Vint Cerf, merci beaucoup pour une soirée passionnante.
De rien.
Vint Cerf. Et nous voudrions clôturer avec de regarder encore une fois à cette vidéo de Google Glass à la fin. C'est vraiment une des choses de l'avenir qu'on va voir très bientôt, et bien sûr un sujet de débat aussi. Bonne soirée et merci beaucoup. Je suis Chris Burns. Merci.